Hi, this is Kevin Turner from Spanish River High School in Boca Raton, Florida, back with you for another episode of AP Daily. This is topic 7.8, sustainable development. What are we going to learn in this video? Well, whenever we start talking about sustainable development and the environment, it's pretty apparent that the problem is our lifestyles, our industrialization, our urbanization, the fact that we're approaching 8 billion people on the planet. We have some environmental impacts here. Remember, that's one of our 5 themes of geography: human environment interaction. So, what has happened? More developed countries, right? The countries of Western Europe, the United States, Canada, Japan, South Korea, Australia. We've kind of used up the planet's ability to handle the deleterious effects of all of this industrialization, urbanization, and what we've been talking about all throughout Unit 7 so far in terms of this globalized economy. And it's not like we can say to the rest of the world, gee, we're terribly sorry. We used up all of the planet's capacity to handle all of this. I guess you'll just have to stay poor forever. They're not going to be okay with that answer. So we have problems like resource depletion. Right. We know that we're using a lot of fossil fuels. We know that there is a rising affluence all over the world. The people that were living on $1 a day are working hard to try and make $10 a day. And those that are living on $10 a day would love to be making $100 a day or more. And so we see that the rising patterns of mass consumption are affecting food and water and all kinds of energy use. So we, of course, have the effects of pollution, right? And this is not just industrial pollution from gigantic smokestacks. It's also the tailpipes of our cars. And so that can be an issue, right? So there's pollution of the land, pollution of the air, pollution of the water. And then, of course, we have the effects of climate change, right? And so when we see these problems, right? And by the way, if you're like most kids, you can imagine some of these images that I'm showing you here, where we see the runoff and we see the chemicals and we see the discharge from all kinds of industrial places. Obviously, we know about the smokestacks. We know about the CO2, the sulfuric dioxide that gets in the air. We know that the landfills are filling up. We know that we are a disposable society, that we're just kind of throwing things away because something newer, bigger, better, faster is coming along. So when we see the effects of all of this is where that word sustainability keeps coming back, right? How are we going to continue to develop? Because we'd all like to continue to develop, right? How are we going to do this in a more sustainable fashion? Can we do this long term? So generally, we know that the trend in climate change is caused by, now like look at our answers here: sea level rise. A lot of kids are kind of tricked into that answer. They say, oh, climate change is causing the sea levels to rise, except that that's not really what the question's asking. What's the cause? Sea level rise is an effect. There's your distractor. Be careful of your distractors. We try to write really good ones, right? Increased use of fossil fuels. Okay, there's a cause, right? That is causing the effect of sea level rise. Reduction in biodiversity, also an effect. Tilt of the Earth's axis. That one's just kind of, I don't really know. I mean, it is true the Earth is tilted. That doesn't have anything to do with our industrial pollution and resource depletion, all that. Changes in the velocity of ocean currents. All right. So clearly D and E are just kind of throwaways out there. But be careful of A and C, because those are not causes. So the correct answer, of course, is the increased use of fossil fuels. All right. So what should we take away then? Well, the first thing I kind of want you to know is that we don't need to panic. Clearly, our behaviors, our industrialization, our lifestyles, especially those that are in the wealthiest parts of the world, have done environmental damage. But we do have opportunities to alter our lifestyles. We can still be, chasing after affluence and all that, but do it in a responsible way, in a more sustainable way. Right? We certainly want to be able to mitigate some of the damage that we've done. So how are we going to do that? Well, we've been talking all throughout these AP Daily videos, even from the first videos with me back in Unit 1. You heard me telling you all the time to think like a geographer. And we always say, let's look at things through that ESPN lens of analysis, right? Economic, social, cultural, political, environmental. Well, take a look at the little diagram over here. We got a Venn diagram. Look what we have. We have economic requirements. We have social requirements. We have environmental requirements. It talks about, is it viable? In other words, can we do this? Is this even, is it even possible? Yes, it's possible, right? Is it bearable? Can we handle it? I think that when we're talking about the one and only earth that we have, we kind of need to make this bearable, right? And certainly it's not going to cost us too much to be a little bit more frugal with the earth's precious resources. And then, of course, is it equitable? Can we make it fair? Can we make it, and again, fair doesn't always mean equal. Equitable in the sense that we don't want everyone to suffer because a few people have everything, right? So when we think about all this is really what sustainability is, right? Is combining all of these Venn diagram concepts. Now you may say, well, he always talks about economic, social, cultural, political, and environmental. Well, there's no political here. Well, what I would tell you is political is all these things. Because when people go into the voting booth, they certainly vote their pocketbook issues, right? They certainly vote from their societal background, right? From their own personal feelings, and certainly people vote environmental issues, right? So that's what's so important about living in our democratic system, is that we are able to have that voice and able to look at things economically, socially, culturally, politically, and environmentally. And again, when you're doing that, you really are thinking like a geographer. Thank you so much for watching this episode of AP Daily. We'll be back soon with another video. Hi, this is Kevin Turner from Spanish River High School in Boca Raton, Florida, back for another episode of AP Daily. This is topic 7.8, Sustainable Development. In this video, we're going to learn about a very interesting vocab term, one of the key terms that you've probably talked about with your teacher in your own classroom. And this is the term ecotourism. Most of us are familiar with the idea of tourism, right? We're going to go someplace and we're going to, everybody wants to go someplace different than where they live. Why would you go somewhere and spend money to go see a place that's exactly like where you're from? But clearly in this sense, we've got that prefix eco. And you guys probably have seen the word eco in front of a lot of different words, right? And that is all about this idea of cultural ecology, how humans are interacting with the environment. Remember, I've said before, that is one of our 5 themes of geography, human environment interaction. So our course and exam description, what teachers oftentimes refer to as the CED, everything that's testable for you on the AP exam. The CED talks about the word ecotourism, and it says it's based in natural environments. Right? So we're not talking about man-made things. We're talking about the physical geography of the earth, the mountains, right? The oceans, those kinds of places. Now, many times those environments are places that have been threatened by the industrialization, the overwhelming development, the human interaction with that landscape. So it's the same environments that are vulnerable that we're trying to make the focus of these ecotourism activities. Why? Because we know that ecotourism not only stimulates the economy by injecting money, because, when we travel, here we are, we're out there spending our cash, but it's also, so it's providing jobs, right, for the local population often, right? Maybe not the best jobs. And that's a bit of a problem with ecotourism too, is that they don't necessarily get the same opportunities, but at least it's some employment opportunity for these people. But it also then can help to protect the environment in question. So the key has to be sustainability, right? That's, after all, what this whole topic is about. Can we do this over and over and over, right, in perpetuity? Can we safely and securely manage, right, those physical resources that are precious, right? And at the same time, you and I can enjoy them as tourists, right? So let's take a look at an example, right? I've been pretty fortunate, right? As a geography educator, I think one of the greatest things that we can sometimes get an opportunity to do is to take trips, right? It's great to read about geography. It's great to watch a video about geography. There's nothing like going somewhere else in the world. So these are some pictures when I took some high school students to South Africa just a couple of years ago. And, we went on the game drive, the safari out in Kruger National Park, and just, being so close to such an incredible array of animal wildlife was just incredible. But everything was in the mindset of sustainability. we had to be careful. They lectured us about, be careful about how you tread lightly through these areas, right? We had to be careful about trash. We had to be careful about, not disturbing the animals in their environment, right? And of course, one of the greatest things about our trip was that we got to walk through a little village, and we took along a soccer ball. I mean, hello, Spatial Shark is all about the soccer, and we played soccer with the kids, and then we gave them the ball, and that became a prized possession in the village after we left. So when we think about sustainability, right, we can take fabulous trips, and by the way, there's lots of places in the world. People are going to Iceland, people are going to Australia, the Great Barrier Reef, again, a threatened environment. But ecotourism can also then be a vehicle that countries can, spend some of that money to sustain and to preserve and to protect the places that people are wanting to come see. Because let's not forget, if those things are destroyed, who will be able to come see them in the future? You got to make sure those things are still there, right? A couple of years before this trip, we went to Peru, and we went up to Machu Picchu, right? And it's world famous, big UNESCO World Heritage Site. They're starting to limit how many people can go through the site a day, because when you have millions and millions and millions of people walk through and touch everything and stuff like that, there's going to be some degradation there. Okay. So let's practice. Well, a couple years ago, we had some questions about ecotourism show up on the AP exam. The popularity of which of the following is an example of the trend towards ecotourism? So as we look through our things here, remember, ecotourism has to be based in natural environments, not man-made, right? And it's got to be oftentimes environments that are vulnerable, okay? So we're not talking about artificial lakes in Texas. I mean, artificial, man-made. Recreational canals in Florida. We've got them right behind my house here in the neighborhood. Again, man-made. So when we think about ski resorts in Chile, that can be physical, but I'm sure there's been some man-made contouring of the slopes of the mountains, and certainly timeshare condominiums. Those are obviously man-made. Those are buildings. So the only answer really here that's even possible are these national parks in Costa Rica, and people can go and they can see the flora and the fauna, and they can do the bird watching, and they can see the volcanoes off in the distance, and spend time on the beaches, and all of that is that trend towards ecotourism. Right now, changing gears a little bit, instead of a multiple choice question, let's look at a free response question. Also appeared on a recent AP exam. And this one was interesting because it's a discursive kind of a question, right? You've probably done that before in school, where you kind of have to argue both sides of the same thing. School uniforms are good, school uniforms are bad, vending machine policies and all that. Well, in this case, tell us how tourism is diminishing the landscape. And then tell us how tourism is enhancing the landscape. Now, you have to be careful, because diminish doesn't always mean bad, and enhance doesn't always mean good. But generally speaking, we're going to see answers that are like that. And you heard me a minute ago talk about that word, environmental degradation. That was a great part of the rubric for this diminishment part, right? The more people that are walking through a site, or the more people that are on a coral reef, or the more people that are, in the rainforest, there's going to be some degradation. It could be litter. It could be, disturbing the wildlife. It could be, looking at pollution, the airplanes that have to fly you in there, the buses that take you up and down the mountain, and all that kind of stuff. That's the diminishing part. But remember also what I said, the enhancing part, the money we're spending. If the local government, if the national government is responsible with some of that money, they can then say, we're going to dedicate a portion of the money that people pay to come see these things into conservation efforts. Let's set up systems to protect these treasures that we want to continue to be able to use as a destination for people from all over the world to come and enjoy. Right. So you can certainly see that there's both the diminishment and the enhancement, right, in this essay question. Okay, so what should we take away from this video all about sustainability and ecotourism? Well, let me throw some facts and figures out at you. Tourism makes up approximately 10% of global GDP. Guys, that's a big number. Right, global GDP is something in the neighborhood of $75 trillion, and 10% of that is people traveling. So ecotourism is only a small slice of that, But as ecotourism becomes more popular, right, it's going to continue to inject a lot of money into the global economy. Right? We've been talking a lot about the global economy. Forecasts are showing that as people around the world are becoming more affluent, more people are joining the ranks of these tourists, right? It used to be that only the wealthiest, right, had the time and the money to be able to travel. Now, certainly the poorest in the world still do not have that opportunity. But all over the world, the middle income countries, right, are advancing and developing and are gaining the opportunity to get out into the world and see new and different things. So, how does that impact? There's 250 million people in the world whose jobs are directly related to the tourism industry. These are the people that work in hotels, the people that work in restaurants, the people who work for travel companies, your guides and your experts when you go into the rainforest and they're going to give you the lecture about the flora and the fauna and all that. So we know that it's not just a global scale issue. Now, this is when we talk about scale of analysis, you look at that global GDP there, but then we can also look at regions of the world. We can look at countries of the world. We can look at parts of countries, right, in terms of scale of analysis. So when we get down to that local scale, the local person doesn't always see all the cash. And that's the one thing we also need to be mindful of, right? It's the big, gigantic corporations that get a lot of the money. And very little actually ends up in the hands of the person who is there with you, right? When you're in the physical environment that we're trying so hard to not only see and enjoy, but also preserve and protect. But I can tell you that every dollar, every euro, right, every little bit of currency that they get, they're really appreciative. I mean, it's important to them and to their families and into their local communities. Now, I hope you get a chance to travel. I've been tremendously fortunate in some of the trips that I've taken. When you travel, I want you to think like a geographer. You've heard me say that to you a lot this year. The old adage says, take nothing but pictures, leave nothing but footprints, right? As a young geography student, this is an opportunity for you when you get an opportunity to see the world to put some of these lessons that we've talked about in AP Daily into practice, because I hope you get a chance to go out and see some of these spectacular places, right? And when you do, right, you'll say, hey, I remember when we saw that in the AP Daily video. Thank you so much for watching AP Daily. We'll be back with. Hi, this is Kevin Turner from Spanish River High School in Boca Raton, Florida. And we're back for topic 7.8, sustainable development on AP Daily. So what are we going to learn in this particular video? So when we measure development, and Ms. Cosgrove and I have been talking to you a lot about development throughout this unit, of course. The United Nations has established 17 sustainable development goals that are used almost like a report card of how we're doing at targeting development and achieving these very ambitious goals. When you think about the word sustainable development, I mean, this is what this topic has been all about, sustainability. Can we continue to do this? So admittedly, when you see a goal like no poverty, people scoff and they say, no poverty, come on. When they say no poverty, they don't mean that they're going to be equal in income to us. We're trying to lift people out of the multidimensional poverty, the kind of poverty that's not just measured economically, but the kind of poverty that's measured by they don't have food to eat, they don't have medical care, they don't have education, even the most basic education. They don't have clean water. They don't have safe living conditions. They don't have, gender opportunity. That's what these sustainable development goals mean, right? We're not saying that everybody on the earth is going to have the same level of development. We're just trying to target the types of multidimensional poverty that are extreme, crushing poverty. All right, how many people in the world are still living like this? The numbers are actually a lot lower than you probably would guess. It's roughly a little less than 1 billion people are still living in this kind of abject condition. Certainly, if there's enough willpower, there is enough traction, there is enough wealth, there is enough opportunity for us to target and say, can we alleviate some of the problems in some of the parts of the world where these goals are still, problematic, right, for us to achieve development? Now, I'm going to give you some examples. clearly 17 goals there. We had to be a little bit selective what we're going to show you. But what I want you to look at is kind of working our way across. The idea of ending hunger. Food insecurity is still a really big problem. Guys, there's food insecurity in the United States, but food insecurity is particularly acute in some of the poorest countries. So, we do have programs where it's either public money, could be government, could be private money, could be NGOs, those non-governmental organizations that we've talked about, could be charitable outreach, faith-based groups, whatever. We are working on ending poverty and ending hunger particularly. You look at immunization and vaccination programs, right? Preventable and treatable diseases that kill millions, right, of children around the world, right? And child mortality and infant mortality is still a big problem. Education, right? So much depends on that idea of an opportunity for even the most basic level of education, right? Because when people are educated, it means that they know more about how to be healthier and how to be safer and how to live a better life. All right, access to clean water clearly is a big issue, right? Hygiene, sanitation, so much of that. Energy, right? And again, renewable, sustainable sources of energy, not the fossil fuels of the past, right? Which are cheap and plentiful and, they're great. But, looking at things like solar and wind and, these kinds of energies that would be able to lift the poorest countries of the world out of poverty. And of course, investing in infrastructure, building better roads, building better, sewage treatment systems, the opportunities to build rail networks and connect parts of countries that are underdeveloped. All of these things go towards those 17 developmental goals. So let's practice. A couple of years ago on the AP exam, there was a question about infant mortality rate. Now, you say, well, that's all the way back in Unit 2, Mr. Turner. Yes, that's a Unit 2 statistic. But remember the spiraling that comes throughout the human geography course, right? We want you to be able to take something from Unit 2 and take content from Unit 7 that talks about economic development and industrialization and be able to talk intelligently about how those things are connected to each other, right? Through the topics and the skills. So you look at infant mortality rate, clearly, we've got some content there where you're going to have to be able to look at a choropleth map and say, okay, I see the darkest colors or the highest rates of infant mortality. And then in part C of that particular question, it said, identify and explain a specific way in which each of the following 2 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are intended to affect infant mortality rates in a rural community in South Asia. So they're putting it into a specified geographical context. Remember, that's one of our skills, right, in the CED. And they're saying, okay, South Asia. Well, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal, right, Bhutan, those are examples of countries that we could talk about here. And if you look at your map, you can see that Bangladesh, India, Pakistan all have, relatively elevated levels of infant mortality. Not the worst in the world, not the best in the world, but let's talk about quality education. Hey, there's one of your 17 sustainable development goals. How is that going to impact, right, infant mortality rates? Right. And you could say, well, wait a second, infant mortality, less than 1-year-old babies dying. And now we're talking about education. How are those connected? Well, think about the medical personnel that are going to be working as the doctors and the nurses. Well, if you have a better educational system, isn't that going to produce better doctors and better nurses and people that are better skilled and better able to handle sick children? But it's not just the lofty idea of the medical personnel. How about just mom? Right? If mom is living in a very poor country and never got an education, how does she know how to care for her children other than just the indigenous wisdom that comes with, being part of a society that's been mothers for thousands of years? And mom and grandma probably give her great advice. When we talk about an educational system, right? When moms have more opportunity to learn, they know better how to take care of their babies. They know more about the things that are going to have a healthier baby as opposed to a baby that's less healthy. Right. So there's all kinds of great things there. When a woman's more educated as a young girl, she's going to, get married later in life. She's going to have less kids. Fertility is going to fall. When you have less children, the opportunity is that those children are going to be healthier Because when you have 5, 6, 7, 8 children, you've got to spread your resources amongst all of those children, right? Fewer kids generally means more successful kids, healthier kids, right? So all of the educational things there can connect to infant mortality. The same thing with clean water and sanitation. This one, you're probably ahead of me here, and you say, wait a second, I know all about how clean water, because you know it's going to be about disease, right? We have so many diseases in the world that are waterborne, that come from, inadequate water supplies or contaminated water supplies. So obviously having cleaner water is going to promote a healthier society, right? Because we're going to get rid of some of those maladies that are due to the poor water supply. But also, if you get past just the sanitation and the hygiene and the hand washing and all that's really important. You could have used that as your answer, but go another step too, and think about how a clean water supply and a management of that water supply could be used for things like irrigation and for crops and for agriculture. Because obviously we know that when you have a better, capability to produce food for your community and for your society, that's also going to promote good health, good nutrition, more longevity, better life expectancy. Because again, when infant mortality is falling, right, what does that obviously mean mathematically? When less people are dying young, it means that the average age is getting older, right? So it's all connected together. So after watching this episode of AP Daily, what have we learned? We know that the SDGs are measuring development, the Sustainable Development Goals, but we need to remember that they might ask us to explain. So we need to be able to talk about how. We need to know that the goals measure both economic indicators as well as social welfare development, things like education and access to health care and those kinds of things. So although the progress has not fully met the achievement targets that have initially been set out, we need to remember that there is tremendous progress being made towards meeting these 17 sustainable development goals. Just like we hope that you're making progress towards your goal of being better prepared for the AP Human Geography exam. On behalf of all of my colleagues, especially our video producer, Tom Miller, our animator, Maggie Brennan, and our production manager, Mila Matveeva, especially my teacher friends from across the country, from my home state of Tennessee, Christy Neuroth, from Texas, Greg Hill, from Maryland, Morgan Patel, from Colorado, David Valdez, from Illinois, Kristen Brandt, and from my near neighbor in Miami, Stevie Cosgrove. I'm Kevin Turner. Thank you so much for being part of AP Daily. Thanks for watching.